So in this video, we are going to have a look at how do we configure the cube dial-peers or the VoIP dial-peers that are needed for routing the SIP trunk calls to the PSTN and receive the calls from the PSTN and send the calls to the Cisco Unified Communications Manager and then receive the calls from the Cisco Unified Communications Manager using the LAN and the WAN Dial-Peers, So hi guys, my name is Amit Singh and welcome to my channel. I hope you guys are enjoying the contents or liking the contents that I'm sharing and it's helpful. In case you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and share this information with other colleagues in your network so they can make benefit out of it. It's gonna be a lot more videos about cube troubleshooting and new features, so ask a lot of guys to subscribe so that it also interests me to make more interesting videos for you guys. All right, so let's get quickly started. Okay, so in the last video, as you have seen, that we have configured a cube basic configuration so that the SIP trunk would work, and there are some SIP configurations needed for the SIP trunk configurations. Now in this video we are gonna go ahead and configure the call routing and dial peers and then make the SIP trunk connection so that the CUCM SIP trunk will be registered and then also the calls will be routed to the correct IP address when we are sending call out to the SIP trunk service provider. All right, in this concept, what we are going to do is we are going to create 4 dial peers. So what are these dial peers? As I already told you last time, that we have a cube here and then we are going to create a LAN dial peer and then we are going to create a WAN dial peer. So you would need actually to receive a call, you will need an incoming WAN dial-peer, and to send out the call, you will need, an outgoing WAN dial-peer. So this will, for an incoming call to the CUCM, also to the CUCM, you would need an incoming LAN dial-peer, and to send a call back to the ITSP, you will need an outgoing LAN dial-peer. Right, so we'll be configuring a dial peer 1000 and 1001 for the LAN dial peer, and we'll be configuring dial peer 2000 and 2001 for the outgoing and incoming and outgoing WAN dial peer. All right, and apart from this, now let's understand what actually a dial peer is and what are its properties. So basically, what is a dial peer? So dial peer usually helps to route the calls, that I have been saying it now for long times. So what are the features? What is needed? What actually it does? So what it does, it creates a set of rule, you know so it will create a set of rule, and based on those rules the calls would be either accepted or rejected. That's um, the that's the feature of the dial peer, or that's the work of the dial peer. So what do we do? First of all, we define the name of the dial peer. you know how do we go ahead with the dial peer? So what do we do is we define the name of the dial peer first. And then the second thing we define is what type of dial peer is it. You know, so is it a SIP dial peer or a POTS dial peer? Okay. And then the third thing is what kind of dial peer is it? Is it an incoming dial peer or is it an outgoing dial peer? So you will define usually a rule to accept the call or reject the call. Okay. So basically, you will define an incoming and outgoing rule for that dial peer by defining a lot of ways. In defining a lot of ways, you can say incoming called number, or um, let's say incoming URI or session target or you know whatever it is. So these are the rules that you would define. Okay, the next thing what you would define in the SIP dial peer is the where should my media be binded to which interface, so binding, bind, control, and media. Okay, so basically to which interface should my signaling go to and to which interface should the media path follow, so you can define this in the dial peer as well. Then what are the type of codecs that I want to use, so you can define either just one codec or you could define a voice class codec in that case. Okay, next thing you could define in the dial peer is DTMF types. So what are my DTMF signaling mechanism? Am I supporting RFC 2833 or am I supporting SIP-KPML or some other DTMF types, So this is one of the requirements of the dial peer or service providers. The next thing you could say, okay, if I support WAD or I don't want to do noise cancellations or anything, so noise suppressions and everything. So you could do it using this mechanism called as no WAD, you know. So in this ways, using these lines inside the dial peer, you could create a dial peer that will help you to route your calls properly inside or outside. Now let's have a look at what are this incoming rule and outgoing rule. So now in our dial peer, we are using a specific incoming rule for a LAN dial peer. So what we are gonna match on is I am going to match on something called as the via header inside the SIP invite message that I will receive from CUCM. Okay, so I'm gonna match on something called as voice class URI. Okay, voice class URI. So how do you get this via header? Where do you get this from? So I just took one of the SIP messages from the internet, just Googled it, just wanted to show it to you quickly. What does this via header looks like? And in this is the invite, one of the invite messages that you see here, and here you would see something called as via header. So just give me a second. All right, so here you will see this is the from header, this is the to header in the SIP invite message, this is the invite that you see, and then this is the request URI, and then here you will see a via header, and in this via header you will see an IP address. So when my CUCM will send an invite to the queue for an outgoing call to the PSTN, it will send its IP address, so I'm gonna match on CUCM's IP address that would be present in the via header that would be sent that would be present in the via header in the invite that will be sent to the cube from the CUCM. Okay, so this is what I was saying here. So I will be matching on a URI via header. So that's my cube very quickly, and that's my CUCM. And when the CUCM will send an invite, I'm gonna use the CUCM's IP address that would be in the via header to match an incoming PSTN call. So basically it's an outgoing call, but it would be incoming to the queue that would go outside, so the LAN outgoing dial pair, you can say here. So LAN outgoing LAN dial pair. Okay, so that's dial pair 1001. All right, so let's just see how do you configure this voice class URI to match the via header. Okay, so simply you will go to the configuration and then you will say voice class URI and then the tag. The tag that I will give is 1001. I just want to match it with the name of the tag of the dial pair, but it's not necessary. You could just give any tag that you think it's relevant for you to understand, you know. And then, of course, I have to say SIP, and then I will give the IP address of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. So this is my communications manager IP address. I will just copy it. I think it's yeah, the IP is, I will tell you, it's 198.18.133.3. This is the IP address. Am I missing something? IPv4. So we have configured the host with the CUCM IP address. That's done. So this way, the outgoing LAN dial pair should be able to accept the call from the CUCM. Let's go ahead and configure our dial pair now. So I will say, sorry, dial-peer voice 1001 VoIP, because it's a VoIP dial pair. And then I will say session protocol. So what kind of dial pair is it? So it's a SIP dial pair, and I will say session protocol SIP version 2. And here now I will say it should accept the call from CUCM. So I will say incoming URI via and then the tag that we have, that's 1001. So this way the CUCM will be the cube will be accept the call from the CUCM. All right, I forgot, let's put a good description. It's a better idea every time. And then the description can be LAN outgoing PSTN dial pair. So now you know that it's an outgoing LAN dial pair to accept the calls or to send the calls. LAN outgoing, I would say national NAT PSTN dial pair, so that you know now what kind of dial pair it is. All right, once you have provided this, then let's bind this dial pair to a particular interface, internal interface. We will say voice hyphen class SIP bind source hyphen interface gig 0/0/0, because it's a LAN interface. I will be binding it to my internal interface. Okay, voice class SIP bind, sorry, control. So control is for signaling, and then you will say voice class SIP bind media for medias. Okay, and let's do one more thing. Let's configure a codec, but let's do it in a different way. Let's say I don't want to just configure one codec, but I want to configure a list of codecs so that it supports these list of codecs. So here I can say, how do you define a list of codecs and then assign it to a dial pair? You will say voice class codec 1. So voice class codec is the way you define a voice class codec, and 1 is just the tag. Okay, and then I will say here codec preference 1. So priority 1 is my G711 ULAW, and then my second preference goes to G711 ALAW. Okay, So now show run pipe section voice class codec 1. This is how you will be able to see the list of codecs that you have defined inside a voice class codec. You will see that you have a codec list, prioritized list, wherein the first preference is given to G711 ULAW codec and the second preference is given to G711 ALAW codec. So whatever the provider will support, you will be able to support, and whatever the CUCM supports, you will be able to support, because you have a list of preferences now. Okay, let's go ahead and assign this voice class codec to the dial peer that we have configured, the LAN outgoing dial peer. Let's go to dial peer voice 1001 VoIP, and then here we will say voice hyphen class codec, voice class SIP, what it is, I think voice class codec 1. Okay, so now you have a list of codecs that you have assigned, and then you will say what is the DTMF mechanism that you support. I will say DTMF hyphen relay. Let's see what are the options available. You can say Cisco RTP, it's proprietary, and then H245 for H323 signalings, and RTP NTE, that's RFC 2833. The provider said it supports RFC 2833. So let's assign this RTP NTE as the DTMF relay type. So I will say DTMF relay RTP NTE. Okay, and then let's just remove this, no bad. So if there is any problem with the silence, the call should not be disconnected. Okay, all right, let's see how does our codec look like. To show run pipe section dial hyphen peer voice 1001 VoIP. So I said how our codec look like, no, but we are trying to see our dial peer. Okay, so here you will see the dial peer that we have configured, the first dial peer for accepting the call from CUCM to send it to your service provider. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and configure the LAN inbound dial peer. That means the call that will go to the CUCM. All right, so that you have the call routing for the CUCM. So we'll say dial hyphen peer voice 1000 VoIP, and then I will give it a good description. I will say description. I think I made a mistake in the description. This should be the LAN outgoing dial peer from Cube to CUCM. So that's the LAN outgoing dial peer. That really makes sense. So we will have to change the description of the another dial peer. That's okay, I will change it. But for now, I'm just keeping it like this, so that's the description. And then now what is the destination pattern? All right, so let's check on CUCM what is actually the phone number that is being configured on the CUCM for the Jabber. Okay, so the number that you see that's configured here is +1408 555 7700. Okay, but what is the number that we are receiving from provider? It's very important. Okay, and if we have a look at the provider is sending us something like, let's see, sending some weird number, so we need to do some translation. So first we need to understand what is it that the provider is sending it to us. So the provider is sending something like 919472 and then some more 4 digits. Okay, so The provider is sending us this number, but the exact number that we should match is this number. All right, that's really strange. How do we match it? We just do the translation on the gateway itself, or we do the translation on the CUCM and then send it to the phone. There are two options. So what we'll do today is we will do the translations on the gateway, because in our last video what we have learned is how do we do the translations on the CUCM. So this time we'll understand how do we do the translations on the gateway. All right. Okay. So now you know that what is the number that is being sent by the provider. So you need to create a routing rule. So what it is, I will use destination hyphen pattern 919472, and then this is what the provider is sending, right? So that's the destination pattern. That means I'm sending, this is the number that should be matched when I'm matching an outgoing dial peer. Okay, so this is the number what the provider is sending to me. All right, so there are two fields or two places where I could translate this particular number, you know. So either I could do it on an incoming or an inbound dial peer from the service provider to the cube. So that's my inbound WAN dial peer, or I could match this on my outbound LAN Dial-Peer. Okay, so there are two options. So what I'm doing is I'm just matching it on the outbound LAN Dial-Peer. So if you want to just play around, you could play around by doing some translations and everything, So if I'm doing it on my inbound WAN Dial-Peer, so what I'll do is I will match the number, and then I will apply a translation rule. And applying that translation rule, what I'll do is I will convert this number to match the telephone number, you know, and then send it to the outbound LAN dial peer, and then the outbound LAN dial peer will match on this pattern. So +1 XXXX, whatever it is. All right. So I'm not doing that much now, but you can play around. I have just given you a hint how you could do it. In case you have some problems, just let me know in the comments and I will try to give you an incoming and outgoing dial peer for an incoming call from the PSTN. All right. Okay, so the next thing that's very important is the description. I think description we already done, and then we have to define what kind of dial peer it is. So it's a SIP dial peer. We do it by applying this command, session protocol SIP v2. And then the next very important is you have matched the number. All right, but where do I send my calls to? All right, I do this by saying session target IPv4 and then the IP address of the Unified Communications Manager, you know. So it will match the destination pattern for an outgoing call or on the outbound call leg, and then it will match this IP address, and then it will send the call to the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. Now, very important thing for an outgoing dial peer is to match the bind interface. So I will say voice class SIP bind control source hyphen interface gig 0/0/0 because it's my outbound LAN dial peer. And then I will say voice class SIP bind media source hyphen interface gig 0/0/0. So this way my call will be routed through the right interface and there will be no problems. Okay, then we will apply the voice class codec that we have configured. So voice class codec 1, and then the DTMF type that we have assigned. So it'll say DTMF relay RTP NTE, and then for noise suppressions and to avoid the call suppression, we will say no VAD. All right. So now we have configured our inbound and outbound LAN dial peer. So let me just go to dial peer voice 1001 wipe and just change the description because the description is not correct. It should be description LAN incoming dial peer. It should be from CUCM to cube. All right, now it looks good. And I will save my configurations. And if you want to have a look at the inbound LAN dial peers, just to show run pipe section dial hyphen peer voice, and it will show you all the dial peers that we have configured. So we have configured 2 dial peers. Here's the first one for an incoming and the incoming call to the cube, and this is the outgoing dial peer for the outgoing call from the cube to the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. All right, so let's go ahead, and as I said, we would need to do a translation, so that this number is translated and matches this number. So we have to translate from 91472 to +148555770. So let's go ahead and configure the voice translation rules and see how does it work. So you will go here and then say voice translation hyphen rule. I think that was 1001 dial peer. So, or I think it was 1000, no? Going from cube to CUCM, so it's 1000. So I will say no voice translation hyphen rule 1001. I will create voice translation hyphen rule 1000. I'm just matching the tags, it could be anything. Don't worry about it. So I'm just doing it like this. So I will say rule 1. So my rule 1 is anything that starts with 919472 and then 1, 2, 3, 4 digits. All right, so I would say it like this. Okay, so what I'll do is I will translate it to, let's say, what's the number that it should match? I think +1 408 555. So I will say add +1 408 555, and then the rest of the digits would be as it is. Okay, so if someone is dialing, for example, 919472 and then 7700, what will happen is it will be translated to +1 408 555 and then the rest of the 4 digits, which is 7700. All right. Once this translation rule has been created, we have to assign this to a translation profile. So let's go ahead and create a voice translation profile, and then I will say voice translation hyphen profile 1000, or let's say, let's give it any name. I will say incoming call. So I will call it as an incoming, and then I will say translate. And what do I have to translate? I have to translate called number, because I am translating the called number, and I'm saying which rule that I'm using. It's voice translation rule 1000. Okay, so translate called 1000. All right. Once this is done, let's go ahead and apply this translation profile to the dial peer. So dial-peer voice 1000 VoIP. All right, so this is the LAN outgoing dial peer. So from cube to the CUCM. All right, so it's an incoming PSTN call, and we are assigning this translation rule at the end of the cube call leg. All right, and then here we will say translation, sorry, translation hyphen profile outgoing. Which direction are we applying? It's an outgoing direction. That means it's an outbound call, so we are applying it in an outgoing direction, this translation profile. And then what is the profile name that we are applying? INC. Good. Now we have applied the translation rule or translation profile to the dial peer. Let's go ahead and test and see if we have if the translation works correctly. Okay, so there is a way that you could test it, and how you could test it, you could say test voice translation hyphen translation hyphen rule 1000, and then what is the number that you are dialing? The number that you are dialing is 919472 and then 7700. And here you go. Here you see that it is it matching? And yeah, it is matching this voice translation rule with rule 1. There is only one rule, and then the original number was 9194727700, and the translated number is +1 408 555 7700, and this would match the called number. Okay, so our translation is correct. So now the incoming and outgoing LAN dial peer has been configured. Let's go ahead and configure the inbound and outbound WAN Dial-Peers. Okay. So for an incoming WAN Dial-Peer, let's now first configure the incoming WAN Dial-Peer. So we would use the same thing. We will match it on the IP address of the provider to make it sure that we are getting it from the right IP address. So the incoming dial peer will be also matched on the voice class URI. Let's go ahead and configure voice class URI 2000 SIP, and then we will say host IPv4 and then the IP address of the service provider, which is 10.1.40.11. So this is the IP address from which we will be receiving an incoming call and sending the outgoing call. Okay, so that's configured. Now let's go ahead and configure the dial peer. So we'll say dial-peer voice. I think we used for an incoming call, we used yeah, 1001. So we'll say 2001 VoIP, and then we will say session, and then we will use protocol SIP v2. This is done, and then we will say the description. So the description will be incoming WAN dial peer from ITSP to cube. So this is now configured. Is a good description that we have given it to this dial peer. And now we will configure the routing rule, the call routing rule. We are matching on incoming URI via uh, 2000, I think 2000. We configured voice class URI 2000. Yep, 2000. So now the incoming URI will be matched. Let's assign the voice class codec to make sure that we have the right codec. We will say voice class codec 1. Let's assign the DTMF relay RFC 2833, and then let's assign the interface for binding. We'll say voice class zip bind for signaling. So control source hyphen interface gig 0/0/1, and for the media 0/0/1, and then we will say no WAD. All right, so now we have a dial peer for an incoming WAN connection. Here you go, you have this dial peer for the incoming connection. Is there anything that is missing? Let's just check if we have all the informations. We have session protocol, we have description, we have incoming URI, we have voice class codec, we have the bind interface, we have the DTMF relay RTP NTE. All looks okay. Let's go ahead and configure dial-peer voice 2000 VoIP. So this would be an outgoing WAN Dial-Peer. So let's give it a description. So it's an outgoing WAN Dial-Peer from Cube to ITSP. All right, now what is the type of session? It's session protocol SIP v2, so it's SIP Dial-Peer. Okay, if you don't put this, it will be an H323 Dial-Peer. Okay, and then you will say incoming. Let's match. So let's match an outgoing Dial-Peer based on let's say on an not on incoming call number, but let's just match it on destination pattern. Okay, so destination hyphen pattern, and then the number that the provider is requiring is an access code followed by any digit between 2 through 9, and then 2 digits, and then again any digits between 2 through 9, and then 1 2 3 4 5 6. So this is the requirement of the service provider. We should send the long distance calls in this format. All right, and yeah, the provider said that we will not accept a TCP connection, so we will have to say session transport UDP. Either you can define it here, or you can define it under voice service VoIP SIP. Under SIP also you can define the session transport UDP. And the most important thing now is voice class SIP bind control source hyphen interface gig 0/0/0, and then the same thing for media. So it has the right IP address now, and then we will say voice hyphen class codec 1, and then DTMF hyphen relay RTP NTE, no WAD. Let's just check the configuration. Voice dial-peer voice 2000 VoIP. All right, we have all the configuration. Let's just check if all the dial peers are up. Show dial-peer voice summary. Here you see that this dial peer 2000 is down. The rest of the dial peers are up, but the dial peer 2000 is down. And what is the reason? Why is this dial-peer 2000 down? Good to know, right? So here you will see that the dial-peer 1000 is up because it has a destination where it could send a call to. But if you have a look at dial-peer 2000, it will match the number, okay? But we have nowhere mentioned where should this call be sent to, you know? So this dial-peer doesn't know where should I send this call to. So I don't want to create any more problems. This is why I do not find any other matching outgoing dial pair as well in the system. This is why I am going down right now. Okay. Now you understand why is this dial pair down. Okay. Because there is no matching outgoing dial pair or there is no matching destination or the target. Okay. So let's go ahead again in this conf t and then dial hyphen peer voice 2000 VoIP, and then we will say session target IPv4 and then the IP address of the service provider where we will be sending the calls to. So that's 10.1.40.11. And let's just check the dial peer summary again. Show dial hyphen peer voice summary. And here you go. Now this dial peer is up because it knows the destination where this call should be sent to, you know. So the destination pattern is this and the session target is this, you know, for the outgoing PSTN call. For the outgoing CUCM calls, the destination pattern is this, and the session target is your Cisco Unified Communications Manager. All right. So I hope it was a long session, but a good one. In the next video, we'll be doing some tests, and then also we will be seeing what are the things that are missing or the other stuff. So it's gonna be a little bit more interesting, and I'm gonna make it a little bit more interesting for you guys so that you guys understand more deeply about these dial peers and troubleshooting and testings and everything else. All right, I hope this was useful for you guys. So we see us again or we meet again in my next video. Until then, thank you and goodbye.